Okay, well, welcome everybody to When Tomorrow Comes. We're already at episode 4. It's got to the point where I'm having to remind myself how far we're in, which doesn't say much about my my short-term memory. So today we're going to be talking about 5G and all the other issues surrounding 5G. This is off the back of a briefing note that Iceni issued from Rob Nicholas, and he's on the line with us. Hello, Rob. How are you?
Hi there. Good.
Good stuff. I'm pleased to say that, backed by popular demand, we have Ashleigh Cook with the. Hi, Ashleigh.
Hi, Ian.
With another new backdrop, which is good. And we've got Dan Jestico and Charlotte Orrell also rejoining us this week. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello, Ian. How you doing?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Now, Rob, normally I give a bit of an intro, but as I am significantly older than probably everyone else on this line, and still think of 5G as a terminology that refers to one of the classes that my kids goes to. What I thought I might do instead is ask you to give an overview of the briefing note you put out, because some people won't have read that, and then we'll just open up conversation from others. So is that okay? Do you want to just fire away with what you were referring to in your briefing note?
Yeah, that's fine. It's off the back of 2 notes that I've produced over the last 6 months or so. The initial one was really looking at 5G deployment, the rollout that was due to be coming any day now, and how planning really responds to that. Obviously, following that being issued, COVID's happened. The level of demand has surged over the last couple of weeks. We've seen a 50% increase in network demand reported by Vodafone in a lot of European countries. So really, I wanted to pick up on the heightened need for 5G to be at the forefront of infrastructure for this country going forward, but also how planning develops a solution to that in terms of the rollout, which is quite a complex issue. So
as it, just for those that aren't perhaps familiar with planning policy, how easy is it to roll out 5G? What are the barriers that are there, or is the system already enabling this to happen? What are the barriers?
Well, the system is enabling it to happen, but it's going through the typical planning process. So there are by definition delays to that at times in terms of applications, and it's not a streamlined system for the level of deployment that we need. And the government have already looked at permitted development rights and potentially shifting those to align with a more widespread streamlined system. So they're looking at it. It's been very slow in terms of deployment and the rollout. So I think one of the lines that I had in my article is it does feel like a transition that's happening in slow motion a little bit. We're kind of constantly waiting for this huge transition to come online.
I don't know whether anyone has any thoughts on whether there are particular authorities that are leading the way in this in terms of giving direction to industry. How are we finding it when working on these projects?
Well, from my experience, it's not necessarily a case of like London leading, which I know some people have said. The presumption is that London will be at the forefront, but actually it's just been very much on a council by council basis. So there's a good example actually in Tameside up in Greater Manchester who have applied for funding to hopefully push their digital exploration a bit further within the borough and try and get money where it needs to be to make sure that the borough as a whole is ready for 5G when it arrives. But it does seem to differ depending on the boroughs and the people within them, not necessarily the regions, if you get what I mean.
Do we think communities are ready for this? I mean, I guess it's the classic thing we all take for granted, and we all get very irate if we can't get connectivity, whether it's on our mobile phones or whether we're trying to dial in from our laptops at home. Are communities ready for this investment?
I think there's going to be a bit of a disparity between the communities that have already been wanting this, and then those who only just realise now because of COVID-19 that it's something that they actually should be looking to incorporate into their communities. I think there's a disparity probably between generations as well, whereby maybe there's a part of the population at the moment who previously never realised the importance of internet connection or having 5G, but now they're realising that perhaps it's something that could benefit them as much as it benefits the sort of younger generations. So I think that it's kind of location based, but also potentially sort of generational and disparities throughout ages as well. And it's probably something that, as Charlotte said, councils are going to have to look at it and try and understand the needs of their population and where they're located, and where the kind of pinch points are in terms of need. And it could be that, London isn't the one that leads, because London already, we have fairly, good connections as it is. And it could be the case that there's parts around the UK that are, they have really, really poor connections at the moment. And so maybe they need to take a step forward and kind of be leading the way on this.
I think there's a huge piece around the understanding element, which you picked up on there, about what each community or age group understand what 5G actually is. And I think that's coming out at the moment with, you've got a headline saying 5G is causing coronavirus, 5G is causing obviously health issues. And I think there's a huge piece around what 5G is, and the fact that it isn't necessarily just faster internet, but actually it's the creation. It's when they throw in this word Internet of Things and no one really knows what it means. But actually the connections of how you create things like smart cities, how you can improve it on your own home, your utility bills, etc., etc. And it isn't just us tapping away on our laptops, but it's actually us making that step forward, collecting data and connecting everything. But I think there's a space there for something to be written or for that to be explained across those different communities you're talking about.
There's a big opportunity as well for operators to
the infrastructure for 4G won't necessarily support 5G because the signal doesn't travel as far. So you're going to need more physical infrastructure in the street to boost signals. Now, this can be in the forms of it doesn't have to be mobile phone masts, it can be in the forms of smart lampposts that have sort of 5G repeaters on them. But the amount of physical infrastructure that needs to go into, especially an urban environment, is going to increase as well with the rollout of 5G to make sure everyone's got a decent signal and it lives up to its potential.
Rob, you were going to say something there. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think there's a big opportunity for operators to really drive home this message, just on both points that Charlotte and Ashleigh were talking through. Firstly, in terms of communities, there's going to be black spots where, there's going to be communities left that potentially operators can go and pick up that area of the country. They can, enter into strategic negotiations with local authorities. And that's what I think we should really be pushing for. But that's also combined with messaging around what are those key public benefits. And I think more needs to be done to maybe get those out there.
And when we talk about this, are we all in agreement that we're talking about delivery of essential infrastructure, or is this still a nice to have? That's a leading question, I know, but what do we think, Ashleigh?
Oh, I 100% think that this is absolutely necessary infrastructure. It's essential to our daily lives now. I think that in our current circumstances, we're learning that it's not just a nice to have dependency. Having internet capabilities, having 4G, 5G connections means that we can we can enhance our way of life. We can have access to all the services that we need without having to leave our homes, without having to travel unnecessarily. And I think that, to take this in a bit of a wider context, what we found is that we can continue living our normal lives, and the impact that we have on the environment and on wider things in the world has reduced. So it's interesting that this is something that we've managed to keep on living, but we're not having to travel anywhere near as much as we were before. And I wonder if this is something that we can see as being a kind of positive out of all of this. And in fact, if we didn't have internet capabilities, I know that I've had my mum and dad sort of speak to me and say, oh, this never would have been possible 20 years ago, because we wouldn't have been able to live in the same way. We wouldn't have been able to communicate in the same way. So I think that it does need to be considered as an essential piece of infrastructure. And yeah, maybe there does need to be some more kind of strategic policies put in place to make sure that this is delivered and delivered to the people who really need it.
I mean, what's interesting, if you think back the sort of week one of the lockdown when everybody discovered MS Teams, and if you remember, Microsoft crashed, and they said that they've just been inundated with people using MS Teams. And I guess that does highlight that that most of us as customers we just rely on the phones and the laptops to work. We press a button, they come on. We give very little thought to the infrastructure that goes on behind that. And I guess it's back to your point, Rob, with the Vodafone uplift in usage. We need to invest in this if we expect to treat this as the new normal.
Mm. And that includes, fibre optic investment as well. That's something that we have seen a huge amount of investment in the last 5 or 6 years. But that needs to continue, because actually that could really enable 5G in some of these rural communities. If you're still delivering on that, you can then link the transmission to devices. So it's sort of twofold.
And have we got any sense of where London finds itself versus other cities, other world cities?
My understanding that we are at the forefront of this, but the Huawei conversations at the moment are what they are saying is throwing that up in the air, and that we shouldn't be using that as an excuse to step behind. But at the moment we are at the forefront, and we are testing, and we're testing not just southeast, we're testing across the country. And I think the aspiration across BT, Vodafone, EE and the likes are to have, say, 20 different cities set up and ready to go with this, and to push the button. I don't know timescales at the moment. I just know that when we're approaching buildings in the built environment, we should be future-proofing them and preparing for 5G to start and be pressed go on, as it were, imminently.
I mean, the Huawei point's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it won't be for this vlog to get into it, but clearly there's a political undertone to that, as much as it is about infrastructure. And if there needs to be alternatives to Huawei, I mean, that's going to be an interesting area for us to be watching. And we're not in a position where we can say too much on it today, but because we're not quite there. But we are working with clients who are looking at rolling out alternatives across London, which I think is going to be fascinating. And hopefully we can say a bit more about that in due course. Dan, is this sustainable? If we were talking about this in a roundabout fashion, if we're needing to impose new infrastructure in communities, are we doing it the right way?
Well, as Rob's alluded to, there's a whole range of different ways in which you can roll out improved internet connectivity. You can do it using fibre, you can do it using 5G phone masts, you can even do it using satellites. So there's more and more ways in which we are sort of exploring digital connectivity. Is it sustainable? Well, these things all use energy. I mean, every time you plug your phone in, it uses energy, but you've got to look at the offset. So if you're using a video conference instead of obviously traveling to a meeting, then that is inherently more sustainable, both in terms of time and carbon. So yes, it is more environmentally friendly. Obviously, there are other sort of sustainability considerations, such as empowering communities and reducing the inequality gap. So that is empowering social sustainability as well as environmental.
And I'm old enough to remember the gold rush of the 3G rollout, which you look at the difference between the infrastructure is required there to where we are with 5G, and it was obviously at that point much more about masts and thinking about the coverage provided by masts, whereas Rob, the technology these days really gives a lot of flexibility with how we can actually, if you like, disguise 5G, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's multiple options in terms of how you deliver it, but how it appears, in the urban form as well. Obviously, it's a big consideration in terms of master planning and developing out sites. We don't necessarily want chunky bits of equipment in the middle of sites or on buildings for that matter. So it can be much easily disguised now compared to maybe when 3G first emerged.
So bringing this to a close, and perhaps I'll put this to Charlotte, especially with your sort of futures cap on. Can we make any predictions on where London, the wider South East, the country at large might be in 5 years' time? Nice, easy one.
Well, ideally.
Yeah.
I think ideally, how would I like in 5 years' time? I'd like 5G to be up and running. I'd like all buildings to have a sort of digital passport that comes with them with all of that information. obviously all of our homes running more efficiently and actually seeing smart cities actually become something more day to day. And I think 5G can allow us to do that. And obviously I'm a bit biased in how I can see it affect built environment rather than, say, Dan, more so on the sustainability point, but really connecting and really seeing like buildings be used more efficiently. I think that's the excitement for me in terms of 5G.
And Ashleigh, perhaps a slightly different point for you. We've probably all read the coverage about the possibility of the NHS rolling out an app, and that obviously raises some privacy questions as well. That again kind of brings back the Huawei comment, which has been in the media. How do you see us reconciling giving people the freedom to use 5G and fibre optics and make use of all of the fantastic technology that probably will become granted, whilst also protecting people's privacy? How do we manage that?
Well, I think people themselves struggle to balance up these two ideas here. I think people want the benefits of technology. They want the benefits of some data collection and, you know, how they see that improve their lives, but then they don't want to give too much away. So there's going to have to be some sort of regulation or legislation in place that controls what's collected and exactly how it's used. But I think in this day and age, I think that we've got a generation of people who are growing up who are more and more familiar with technology, with using phones. And my view is that a lot of them won't even consider really what sort of data is collected on them. So I think that we've kind of got a bit of a change coming, and that perhaps there is an influential sort of group of people who won't mind so much maybe their privacy being impacted if it means that they are well connected and they have the kind of apps and the technology available that improves their lives. It's all going to be a bit of a balancing act. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to happen, but one thing we need to think about is just about making sure that it's balanced across generations. And one thing that concerns me is that the older generation are kind of left out of this, and they're not given the access to the technology, or they don't have the knowledge necessarily to use it. And that's something that probably needs to be addressed, and certainly their views need to be taken into consideration on the kind of privacy point as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Well, look, thanks everybody for joining us today. Rob, thanks for writing the article. I'm sure it's a subject we'll want to come back to. I know that at sort of a more basic level, we will be keeping an eye on how the planning system helps to, to enable the rolling out of 5G and further means of technology and communication. But for now, thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to catching up with everybody in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Cheers.
Thanks, Ian.